Thanks so much for having me, Josiah. So, one of the most common interview questions that you're going to get, it's actually not one question, it's a type of questions. They're called behavioral interview questions. And we figured out that, to be quite frank, a lot of times people can lie in interviews. They can say, oh, I'm a team player or I'm a hard worker. And then in reality, once they get the job, they're neither of those things. So what we've learned over time is that by asking behavioral questions, asking questions about a specific time when that candidate exhibited the behavior that we want, we can get a better sense of whether or not they actually are skilled in that area, whether or not they're the type of person we want to hire. You'll notice when a behavioral question is being asked because it's most often preceded with, tell me about a time when blank, or some other version of that. Tell me about a time when you, and then whatever follows that is the behavior that you exhibited. Most often it's things like, tell me about a time where you had to work hard under pressure, or tell me about a time when you demonstrated leadership. But really, you can use that framework for any knowledge or skill or ability that we want in potential candidates for the job. Now, the key thing to remember with behavioral interview questions is that you need to separate out the story of what happened to you from the action that you took. So I coach a lot of people to answer any behavioral interview question in 3 parts. Why 3? 3 is easier to remember for me. There are a number of other people who give advice in the form of acrostics like the STAR format or something like that as a way to remember the stages of interview. But I like 3 because truthfully, I was an undergrad English major and I like stories, and most stories happen in 3 acts. And your story will too. The first act is the situation. Here is what happened to me. Here's how we got into that scenario that led up to me having to exhibit that leadership behavior, for example. All of the details of the story, all of the premise and everything in the first act is what happened to you. The second act is the action. It is what you did in response to that situation. So this act is 100% about you and how you responded and what you did. So we've separated out in the first 2 acts what happened to you versus what action you took in response to that. And the third act is the result. Hopefully a profitable and successful result. Otherwise, you probably shouldn't be sharing this as your story of a leadership behavior. You don't want to share a leadership behavior when you failed. But the result of it, how you demonstrating that skill or ability resulted in something that worked well for you, for your team, and for the company. So 3 acts. First act is what happened to you. Second act is what you did, what your specific action was. And then the third act is the successful result of your action. I think it pays to actually prepare some of these ahead of time. You can probably count on a leadership question, a working hard under pressure question, a teamwork question, and then a few others. And the beautiful thing is that if you think about 4 or 5 times, 4 or 5 stories from your career that you really want to exhibit and make sure you say, sometimes you can play them in different areas. So a leadership story can also be a teamwork story depending on how you tell it. But if you're prepared and you think ahead of time and you've fragmented it out into 3 acts, you're going to tell a way better story that's going to result in way more job offers.